Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. You know, even by the insane standards set by this White House, today took us even further into, frankly, crazy town. Tonight, I'm going to be joined by lawmakers from both the House and the Senate, and we're going to try, keywords try, to make sense of everything that went down today. I'll also speak with a Capitol Hill insider about what's really going on behind the scenes and where he believes we'll go from here. We'll also take a look at the human toll that this shutdown is taking. But first, I want to bring in our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman, who again drew the short straws to try and explain what happened this morning because, and I'm used to it like you, my jaw, I had to pick it up off the table after I heard our president go the places he went to.
Yeah, he was making informal comments to the press as he was heading to his helicopter and eventually heading to Texas to the border today. But crazy town, an apt description, and even by Trumpian standards. Now, on a normal night, we would play the bulk of his comments just to show you how totally off the wall they were. But we're a little pressed for time tonight, so we'll hit a few prime examples, including this one.
During the campaign, I would say Mexico's going to pay for it. Obviously, I never said this, and I never meant they're going to write out a check. I said they're going to pay for it.
Now, normally we'd fact check this and even show you a document from his campaign that specifically says just that Mexico would cut a check. But there's no need to, because everyone in America has heard this president talk about Mexico paying for the wall. Sadly, that was one of the president's more innocent comments this morning. This next one, though, was not.
I find China, frankly, in many ways, to be far more honorable than Brian, Chuck, and Nancy. I really do. I think that China is actually much easier to deal with than the opposition party.
So to review, China, a country that's ruled by a totalitarian regime, the country that we're in a trade war with, the country that Trump keeps saying is cheating America financially, China is more honorable to our president than duly elected American congressional leaders. And it gets worse, as the president essentially accused Democrats today of aiding and abetting violent criminals.
The Democrats, which I've been saying all along, they don't give a damn about crime. They don't care about crime. They don't care about gang members coming in and stabbing people and cutting people up. They don't care about crime.
Speaking of not caring about people being cut up, well, this is a picture of the late Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi, who was cut up by the Saudi government. I can't recall exactly why this came to mind in this moment. There was a time, though, in our not too distant political past where the term disagreeing without being disagreeable ruled our politics. Sadly, that's no longer the case on either side, but a new trend has come to light under this president, what I'm calling the Trump whisperer syndrome, where Republican lawmakers confronted with terrible things the president has said seem to find alternate meanings that let him off the hook. And we got the latest example. There have been way too many to count just after the president spoke this morning.
I think he's frustrated. My guess is that Speaker Pelosi's frustrated too. I think it'd be fair to say that he's made more progress negotiating with President Xi of China than he has negotiating with Speaker Pelosi.
And, you know, maybe, Rich, maybe we can judge and respond to this president what he actually says, the words that come out of his mouth, you know, like we did with the 44 presidents who preceded him, instead of what he really meant was this.
The tweets are official president statements.
Yep.
We have the president live. We've documented 7,000 times roughly that he's lied already. To me, one of the things that's most upsetting, because I'm not shocked anymore by this president, is how 53 Republican senators feel the need to retranslate what the president said, grading him on a curve that takes you from an F to an A. It's really concerning as much as it is upsetting. Andrew, thank you. Now, I want to bring into the program Senator Bob Menendez, Democrat from New Jersey. I almost don't know where to start except in the litany of that 15-minute diatribe before the president got on Air Force One. I'm curious, what did you find both the most offensive and also concerning about what he said?
Well, a lot of it is offensive. First of all, Democrats have worked hard to protect this nation. it's Democrats who have made sure in the last budget battles that we had full funding for our law enforcement entities, particularly back at home for police, firefighters, and emergency management. It's Democrats that have given significant amounts of money to border security, for example. So this suggestion by the president is outrageous to try to say that Democrats somehow like criminals. I mean, no one accepts or would even comprehend such a statement. And then to say that President Xi is more honorable than the Democratic leaders of the House and the Senate is pretty outrageous when it is China that is militarizing in the South China Sea and creating a risk to us, where it's China that keeps propping up North Korea and allows it to continue on its path to nuclear weaponry, when it's China that is manipulating its currency and hurting the United States economy by doing so, when it's China that steals intellectual property rights of American companies that undermines the economic vitality of those companies. And the list goes on and on. So I'm pretty amazed at the president's statements. But in another respect, you know, the capriciousness in which he thinks he can govern, he forgets this is a democracy. This is not an authoritarian government. And so he's going to have to learn about the Constitution and separate co-equal branches of government.
I'm not naive, nor am I shocked at what I heard from the president, and I understand the stranglehold he has on his base. But there's 53 Republican senators, some of which I know you call friends. What I don't understand is they know that many of them will outlive the president in Washington, and they're still going to have to figure out a way as an electoral body to get things done. If the president's declaration of an emergency somehow is enacted, if somehow, some way, his scorched earth is going to minimize the jobs that all you guys hold. Yet today, Senator, I hear so many of them trying to explain away what the president said, either in black and white. And I'm just curious, they got to know that the damage is, this is real scarring on the U.S. Senate. Why haven't they spoken out? Not all of them, but more than one or two that are retiring.
Well, as I've said to some of my Republican colleagues privately, there's going to come a point here in which you're going to have to decide whether to be a partisan or a patriot. If the president declares an emergency and uses billions of dollars of the Department of Defense's budget, which would undermine the Department of Defense's national security objective, that's going to be a moment in which Republicans cannot stand silently by. If the president continues to act in authoritarian ways, that's going to be moments in which the Republicans cannot remain silent. If the government continues to be closed because of the arbitrary and capricious nature of the president, including closing departments of government that have nothing to do with a border security question or a wall or homeland security, but he's holding them hostage to his requests, then Republicans cannot be silent. Now, I think many of them are coming to that realization. I hope they'll have the courage to ultimately oppose him publicly and say enough is enough. I know some of them fear that his personal popularity in the base of what is now the Republican Party may be a consequence to them electorally, but they're going to have to respond, I hope, to the higher calling of their role as a United States Senator, both for the institution and even more so for the American people.
Senator, who blinks first here? I mean, at the end, somebody's got to concede. Is there some grand bargain, you think, in the offing? Does the president finally have to come down off his number? Do Republicans kind of take the issue away from him and just pass something if McConnell will allow a vote? How do you think this thing ends?
Well, look, you know, at the end of the day, no matter what, you need the signature of the president, unless you derive enough votes in both the House and the Senate to override him. Now, as was pointed out earlier today by some of my colleagues, the appropriation bills that would fund the government passed at the low end with 92 votes. That is far in excess of what it takes to override a veto of the president. So at some point, Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader, should let the Senate be the Senate. It should allow itself to express itself and vote. And if the president rejects the proposition, which the House sent over bills that were sponsored originally by Republicans, that were agreed to by Republicans, that had the near unanimous vote of Republicans, and then the Senate gets to vote on it and it has a veto-proof amount, the president will have to decide whether he wants to continue to keep the government shut down, the consequence to 800,000 Americans who are doing vital jobs on behalf of all of us, the consequences to millions more of Americans who can't get the business loan from the SBA, can't get their mortgage from the FHA, are seeing consequences at the airports, and so much more. That he'll have to make that decision. And if he decides to veto it, then I believe there would be enough votes to override it, and that would end it. But that can only happen if the Republican leader in the Senate allows us to actually act as the Senate and express ourselves as a co-equal branch of government.
What a mess. Senator, I appreciate the time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, when we come back, we'll be joined by another lawmaker who worked for President Clinton, and he's going to talk about what it's like, not just in the Oval when you have a government shutdown, but some of the consequences, unintended possibly, that could happen if this declaration emergency actually goes through. Stay with us.